Hello! In this video, we are going to learn how we can use the properties of equality. Evidence-wise, we're going to make sure that we know what they are, first of all. And then, really the main thing from here is if you do something to one side of an equation, you must do the same thing to the other side. We'll look at more of what that means when we actually understand what the properties of equality are, but really that's the big takeaway already. That's already the thing to remember you'll see in the learning experience down there. So, what are the properties of equality? First off, make sure you write all 4 of these down, as well as the examples. There are 4 properties of equality. The first one is, or at least there are 4 that we're going to look at. The first one is the addition property of equality. It simply says that if you add to one side of an equation, you must add the same amount to the other side. So for example, we've got 5 plus 3 is equal to 8. We know that that's true. If we want to add a plus 2 to one side of that equation, we also have to add the plus 2 to the other side. It needs to stay the same. If we do one thing to one side, we have to do the exact same thing to the other side. You'll notice I put the original values in parentheses for both of them just to show you better which things are staying the same and what's being added in this case. We also have the subtraction property of equality. It's almost the exact same thing. The only difference is if you subtract something from one side of an equation, you must subtract the same amount from the other side. Again, we can see that in the example. If we subtract 7 from one side, we have to subtract 7 from the other side. We have the multiplication property of equality. Again, the same thing. If you multiply something by one side of the equation, you have to multiply it by the other side as well. In this case, we're just multiplying by 2 for both of them. And then the division property of equality, again, same idea. If you divide one side of an equation, you must divide the other side by the same amount. So there's not really any differences between those 4 properties of equality. It's just making sure that if you do something to one side, you have to do it to the other side as well. There are more properties of equality as well, but we're not going to be looking at any of them. These are the 4 that we need to know for what we're going to do this year. So one way you can think about the properties of equality is if you consider a scale. If you were balancing something and you knew that something was equal to this thing, if you try to add something to one side of the scale is going to tip, and it's no longer going to be even. So, if you want it to stay balanced, then we can just do the exact same thing to the other side, and that will balance it out. That way, as we go through something, it doesn't change our equation. Our equation will stay the same because it is balanced. As they say,
perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
So, in this example, we're just going to try to figure out which property of equality did we use. We started with the equation 3x plus 3 is equal to 12. And then we wrote an equivalent expression, which is 3x plus 3 minus 4 is equal to 12 minus 4. Well, one place we can start is by underlining or highlighting the things that are the same. For the most part, for right now, if we're just trying to figure out which property we used, we can actually kind of ignore those things. That leaves us with this minus 4 and a minus 4. You'll notice that we did the same thing to both sides. We subtracted 4 from both sides. So that means we use the subtraction, since we are subtraction property of equality. And unless you're writing like a CER or something, you can just abbreviate property of equality as POE. Hopefully your teachers will know what you're referring to. One thing that I do want to show about this is that these 2 expressions are equivalent still. For example, if we just pick a number for x, I'm just going to pick 3, and we plug it into this first one, we're going to get 3 times 3 plus 3 is equal to 12. Hopefully that's true. 9 plus 3 is equal to 12. So we know to start with that one was true. Now, if we plug x is 3 into the second expression, it should still be true. It might not be the exact same values, but it should still be a true expression, and that's what we want to see. So I'm going to do a couple steps here. I'm going to do 3 times 3, which is 9. I'm also going to do 12 minus 4, which is 8. We know that 9 plus 3, oops, that should be a subtraction sign, is 9 plus 3 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. So 8 is equal to 8. You'll notice that although these two are no longer the same, they are still equal. They are still true. That is what our property of equality is doing. It's just changing it around so it's equivalent. It keeps our equation true, which it should do. So hopefully that makes sense. Take a minute, write down this example if you need to. Now it's time for you to try this out. There are 2 questions here for this you-do. All you need to do is figure out which property of equality we used. The first one shouldn't be too bad. You can use the same strategy as the previous one. The second one's going to be a little bit harder. You need to think about what you see. Are they the same thing? Think about what we did last quarter, last year even, to help you with that. Ready to go. Pause the video if you need to, if you didn't figure that out. The important thing to remember from here, I already told you at the beginning of the video, if you do something to one side of an equation, you must do the exact same thing to the other side. That way things stay perfectly balanced, as all things should be. That's really the key idea here. And that is one of the most important things to know in algebra, just in general. Anytime you do anything in algebra, that is something that you need to consider. That continues on through the rest of your time in math, through high school. Depending on what you do in college, you're still going to be doing the same thing. When I was doing stuff in Calc 3, for example, I was still doing properties of equality, though I wouldn't necessarily call them out at that point because I just knew them that well. So super, super important. Really, really, really critical thing for you to remember. So there's some suggested practice problems for you here. There's technically 4 problems. The first 2, A and B, they're the same thing as you did for the you-do. Just figure out which property of equality you need to use. The second one, you have 2 equations. You're trying to figure out whether they're equivalent or not. Make sure you explain in words. That means it's a CER. Explain why or why not using the properties of equality. The last one, you are going to use the multiplication property of equality to write an equation equivalent to 3x is equal to 5. There are lots of different answers you could have for this. You just have to come up with your own. Good luck.